Yesterday we talked about, we were out here, we talked about exception handling and what is a profile basically, and what is exception handling and what are constructors. Okay, now today I am going to give a little bit time on a testing framework, right? Because that is very important. Okay, now what happens is that in practical scenarios, fine, something like this would be your test script. Okay, these will be your test scripts. Alright, and this will be Selenium. Okay, so the stuff over here is Selenium. Now the work of Selenium is to interact with the browsers. Fine, Selenium, what it does, it actually interacts with the browsers. It will, but you need something else as well. You need to generate some reports. Right, while working with Selenium, you need to generate reports. Fine. Then you need to read your data. There is another requirement. Okay, you need to read your data from an external source, like an Excel file or an XML file or a text file, whatever it is. You have to read your data from some external data source. Okay, and along with that, there is a requirement that you have to generate some logs. Logs means that suppose the script is running for 20 hours. It's a big number of test cases are getting executed. Okay, so you need to know what happened at what time when the script was getting executed. Okay, suppose some test case failed or something is there. Okay, so you need to know what happened when the script was executing, right? At which moment which function was called or something like that. So we need some logging to happen as well in a text file. That is, in a text file we keep all the records, right? Moreover, you might need to execute the test cases in a particular order, and you might need to skip the test cases one by one. Okay, it might be that I don't want to execute this test case. Right. Now Selenium will not manage all this. Work of Selenium is only to interact with the browser. Right. So what we do is that in between we keep a central controlling entity or a manager, central manager known as TestNG or JUnit. Okay, or some people use fitness. There are many tools available in the market. I am planning to go with TestNG in the course, right? There's a reason behind it. The reason is that if you go with Selenium Grid or any other thing, the documentation of Selenium Grid is very good. It's very easily available with TestNG. Okay, and overall, it's my personal opinion, TestNG is a better testing framework than a JUnit. But it's not like that you cannot learn JUnit if you're learning TestNG. Both of them are quite similar as well. If you have learned TestNG, you can learn JUnit as well. On my website, if you go to my website, qtpselenium.com, Then module 8 is JUnit framework. You can watch the video on it. It's a free module. And module 9 is also a free module. You can just watch the video. So I'll discuss TestNG in the course, right? Because it is a much more practical framework. Okay. Moreover, the reports. Okay. The reports generated in this framework are XSLT reports. If you go here and type TestNG XSLT report, this is a very good report. Okay. The report looks something like this. It's got a pie chart stuff in it, and it's quite user friendly. Okay, the JUnit reports are not so good. Right. So where I was basically, I had drawn this diagram. Hold on. And I told you that these are the things, bare minimum things which you need in every framework. Whatever kind of framework you are making, you need this. So for that we use TestNG JUnit of fitness as controlling entity. What they do, they read the data from the Excel file, they call the corresponding test cases, okay, in a particular order, skip the test case, right? They generate the reports, they generate the logging and all everything. So they coordinate between everything. Alright, so that's why it's important to learn this tool as well in order to, if you have to actually do a project, if you have to actually implement Selenium in your company. Okay, so I'll just close this. Sorry, and I'll open up Eclipse. Hold on, it's kind of hanged. Oh. Alright, so now in order to work with TestNG, the first thing which you need to do is that you need to install TestNG in Eclipse as an external add-on, as a plugin. Fine. To do that, you need to go to this option over here, help, install new software. Okay. And now go to Google. And type TestNG Eclipse. Okay, you'll get the first link. Go to the first link. Go here, install the plugin, this link. Okay, this is the link. Now I am assuming that everybody is having Eclipse 3.4 and above. Fine, because these days everybody has the latest version of Eclipse. So what you need to do is that you need to copy this particular URL, right? Go to Eclipse, paste the URL. Copy this URL. I'll give you the URL on WebEx as well to everybody. Fine. Copy this URL, go to your Java this and paste this. Fine. And click on TestNG over here. Okay. And keep on clicking on next, and it will be installed as an add-on in your Eclipse. Okay. How do you check whether it's installed? Eclipse will also restart in the end. Okay. I already installed it. So if you go to Windows, show view, other, and make sure that the laptop or desktop is connected to the internet while installing it, because it actually gets the binaries and everything from the internet. Okay. Now to check it whether it's installed or not, you can go to Windows. Hold on. Yeah. So you can go to Window, Show View, go to Other, okay, and in Others there will be a Java option. Expand this Java option and you'll get TestNG. So if you're getting this over here, that means it's been installed in your Eclipse. JUnit as a framework is already pre-installed inside Eclipse. Eclipse comes pre-installed with JUnit, but TestNG you need to install it. Okay. Now I'll create a new project called day 5. Okay. Alright, fine. Now in my source folder, okay, I'll make a new package. Okay, a new package called test cases. Now what is a package? Package is like a folder inside a folder. If you go to the physical path of this project, if you go here on the physical path, if you open the source folder, inside source folder, you will be able to see the test cases package, the folder. Package is actually a folder. It helps you to organize your content. Suppose inside the source folder, you have got 1000 Java files. So you'll distribute themselves and you'll organize them in various folders. So those folders are known as packages. Right. So I have this package called test cases. Right. In this, I'll create a new class. Say sample test. Okay. There is no main function inside TestNG. There is no main function inside TestNG. Okay, and you have a class called @test. So you have a annotation called @test in TestNG. Okay, there is no main function, and you write something like this: public void say test A. Right? I'm just taking a simple example. And what you need to do is that you need to add the TestNG library in your project. If you look at this and if you look at the error, then after the error, what you need to do is you need to move your mouse over the error and you need to select the option add the TestNG library. And once you do that, TestNG library is added. It's got the testng.jar file. Okay, and what you need to do is that you need to import the test annotation in your project. Import org.testng.annotations. Okay, select this and this will be added and this annotation will be there. Now this annotation represents that this test A is a function. Okay, so for example, I make a function called test selling product. I need to test the selling of a product functionality on a website. Okay, and inside it I'll write system.out.println selling the product. Basically what we write inside it, we write the WebDriver code here. Okay, now if you right click on the sample test case and run it as a TestNG test, and if you look at the output, you will see the output like the total tests were run were 1, failures were 0 and skips were 0. Okay, selling the product also gets printed. So basically you have to run this test case like this. Right click, run as TestNG test. After you have installed TestNG as a plugin, you will get this option. Okay, and once you run it as a TestNG test, you will get an output like this. Secondly, in your Eclipse, you will get, hold on, you will get a tab like this, results of running sample test. You will get a TestNG tab on the top, and if you look at this, in this, okay, hold on. Yeah, it's coming now. In this, you will have this hierarchy. It will tell that in default cases, test cases or sample test was executed, in which the test case was test selling product. This is the one. Green represents that it is passing. Okay. Now I'll make, suppose you can make more than one test annotation in a class. You can have more than one function with @test annotation. Right? You can make one more test case over here. Say public void empty cart. So this is my test case. Another test case in which I will empty my cart on a shopping website, suppose. Okay, so I'll just print system.out.println empty the cart. Right, now if I go to my sample test, right click on it, select the option run as, and select TestNG test over here, then what will happen is that in your console you'll see the output that the total test cases which got executed are 2, 5, and if you look at the results of running the class sample test, then empty cart test is executed first and then test selling. Right, and if you look at your console, then the output also tells you that empty the cart prints first and then selling the product gets printed. Okay, now what we want, the test cases should be executed in an order. First this one should execute it and this one. People think that the test case which is written on the top will get executed first, the one written at the bottom will be executed after it. It is not like that. Okay, right? In order to make the test cases dependent on each other, you have to do something else. For example, I make one more test case called @test public void say it's OS commerce website. Okay, question. There's a question being asked. What is annotation in Java? What does it represent? Well, basically out here, test, this is an annotation. This tells TestNG, when it runs the program, TestNG reads this annotation and it automatically understands that this is a test function. Okay, annotation you can say is like a marker. Okay, it's like a marker which symbolizes something, that this stuff is something. If I run this test, okay, what happens? If I run this test, then in my results I get that 2 test cases were executed, empty cart and test selling product. Okay, but suppose if I don't give this annotation over here, if I remove this, then this will no longer remain a test case. This will be a simple function inside the file sample test. If you run this sample test.java, you will see that only one test case has been executed, test selling product, which had the annotation. So annotation is like a marker which tells you that, or which tells TestNG that this is a test case which has to be executed. Okay, got it, right? There are many other annotations as well which we will be studying. Okay, I hope you got it. Fine. Now there is another annotation called @test, and you write a public, you write void and say check product availability. Okay, this is another test case, right? One more question. Question being asked is @test specifies TestNG in all cases. I cannot get your question. @test specifies TestNG in all cases. @test, okay, don't get confused. It only does one thing. It tells TestNG that this function, it is representing a test case. Okay, @testng. Yeah, it is a predefined annotation. Annotations are always predefined. For example, we write Firefox driver, iDriver, Chrome driver. Everything is predefined. Similarly, TestNG is also, test annotation is also predefined. See that I have imported it on the top. I have imported it. It is somewhere inside TestNG. Okay, are you getting it? Fine. So it's predefined. Okay. Now suppose there's a third test case, system.out.println check product availability. And now if you run this as a TestNG test, you'll see the output in the fashion, in the results, that check product availability gets executed first, empty cart executes after that, and test selling product executes after that. What is happening? The order is not from top to bottom, and the order is also not from bottom to top. If I cut this test case, put it on the top, right, and now I run it as a TestNG test. In the results, you'll see that check product availability executes first, then empty cart, and then test selling. Okay. Now, what I need is that I need a particular order. That means this test case should be executed in the beginning, the first, right? Rubinder, yes, it is alphabetical, but sometimes it is also not alphabetical. You are not able to understand the logic sometimes, that how it is actually picking up the tests. It is alphabetical, but most of the times, sometimes it is not alphabetical. Okay. Now you want to execute this test first, right? Then after this test, and then this test, suppose, in this order. For that, what we do is, along with test, you will write brackets. This is the syntax. You write depends on methods equals to, and you give the name of the method, that is check product availability. This means that this function is dependent on this test case. Okay. If this test case executes successfully, only then this test case will be executed, and it will be executed after that one. And again I can use the same line over here, that this test case is dependent on check product availability, as well as we put a comma over here. You put a comma over here and give the second test. That means empty cart test is dependent on both check product availability and this one as well. If suppose this one gets failed, if this test case is failed, then both the test cases will be skipped. In the reports, in the results, it comes as that the test case has been skipped. Okay, so now, right, I will tell you how it fails in some time. I'll tell you. Okay, if I run this sample test and if I run it as a TestNG test, what happens is, if you see the output, check product availability, test selling and empty cart. Now I get the order which I wanted. Okay, now I am getting the order which I actually wanted. Fine. Now, hold on group, I'll just answer a question. Now in TestNG, if you refresh your project, you will also see default test output folder coming up. In this folder, you actually have the HTML reports. If you look at index.html over here and go to the properties, go to this file, open this file in a browser. Sorry. Sorry. So you will see 3 pass methods over here. So this is a little bit HTML reports, but it's not as good as the other report which I was talking about, the TestNG XSLT reports, which we will discuss in some time. Right now, in this, just a minute. Yeah. In this, you have this test output folder, and every time you run the project, the new reports are generated, old ones are lost, and this TestNG output folder updates itself every time. You just have to refresh this project folder and open up the report. Okay, so old reports are lost, new reports are made every time you run this project. Okay, the question which is being asked is, if I want other tests to run, even if this fails, that's not possible. Then you don't make them dependent on each other. If you want that test selling product should execute whether check product availability is executing or not, then that means is passing or failing, whatever is the case. Then don't make it dependent on that. If a test case is dependent on some other test case, right, then that test case should get executed successfully for the other test case to carry on. Right, that's why. If it fails, suppose you have to send somebody an email. If the login test has itself failed, suppose this one was login, the email test should be skipped. It's something like that. So if your test cases are dependent, then only put them in a single file and depends and use this attribute depends on methods. Okay, fine. Now suppose I make one more Java file. Suppose I make a Java file called login test. And in this I keep @test annotation called public void test login. Alright, and suppose I'm writing WebDriver code in it and whatever it is. Generally what we have while testing, we have an expected value and an actual value. Okay, that's exactly what we have, right? So suppose I have a expected value as, suppose, hello world, and I write the Selenium code, okay, suppose to extract some text from the application, and I got the actual value as, say, again hello world. What I need to do is that I need to compare both these values. Practically when we work, this will come through Selenium. Selenium driver.findElement.getText. It will get the text out of the application or something like that. Okay. So these are the two actual and expected values. You want to compare both of them. If both of them are equal, then you want to report in the reports that it passed. Otherwise, you want to report a failure. Okay. For that, we actually use, for failing or passing the test cases, we use assertions. Okay, assertions in TestNG. Right. Now, what is an assertion? Well, assert is a class inside TestNG. It's a class in which all the functions are static. If a function is static, then you without creating the object of that class, you can call it, right? So if I write assert.assert, you will see all these functions coming up. Okay, one of the functions, right? Okay, one of the functions is assert equals. In this, you supply the actual value first. Look at the order. I am supplying the actual value first and expected value after that. Now, assert class, it has got inbuilt capabilities. You really don't have to worry if both the values they don't match, then automatically assert class throws an error. Okay, you really don't have to worry. If you run this program, login test, if you right click on it, you run it as a TestNG test, then in the results you will see that this is passing. It's fine, nothing is happening, all is good. But if I make, suppose, the actual value as something different than the expected, right? And if I right click on login test, run it as a TestNG test, you will see that it is failing. Red symbolizes failing of a test case. And if you look at the error, it will tell you the expected was hello world, but actual value was hello world xxx. Right? So you can interact with the reports with the help of assertions. If the assertion fails, then automatically in the reports it comes that it is failing. And the test case, the status goes into red, it is marked as a failure. And if you look at the console as well, you will see that there was one test case executed, login test, which was a failure. Okay, now there is another function in assert class. That function is assert dot assert true. This function. Okay, you have to give a condition and a message in this. Message, you can give any error message depending on you. Okay, and a condition. Suppose I write 2 greater than 1. This condition, right, at runtime will either evaluate to true or false. Right? If in this case, this will evaluate to true. That is 2 is greater than 1. If this condition is evaluating to true, then this assertion will pass because I am asserting true over here. But if it asserts to false, then this will fail. Now let me run this. If I run login test now, it will pass because 2 greater than 1 is true. But if I write 2 greater than 12, then an assertion error will be coming up, and in reports you will see this error message coming up. The error message which you specify over here, that will be automatically coming up in the reports. So if you right click on this login test and if you run as TestNG test, you will see that in the reports you will see assertion error coming up. Okay, so now when is this kind of assertion used? Suppose what I can do is I can write Selenium code over here which finds whether the element is visible on the page or not, or enabled on the page or not. If it is not enabled, I want to throw an error. If it is not visible, I want to throw an error. So in those kinds of scenarios, you can use this kind of assertion. If you have to compare two values, okay, if you have to compare two values, then you can use assert equals. If you have a condition, okay, then you can use assert true. There is one more assert function called assert false. This is actually opposite of assert true. This will pass if the condition evaluates to false and fail if the condition evaluates to true. On failure, the message will be actually sent in the reports automatically. Right? I hope you got it. Fine. So this is about assertions. This is how you actually do the validation. Fine. You have actual values in the application, and you get them, you compare them with the assertions, and you interact with the reports. Now these all things are not in Selenium. Okay, these all capabilities are not in Selenium. Selenium will only interact with browser. It will not help you to execute your test cases in after one another. It will, like the way I was doing, right? It will not help you to generate reports the way I am generating reports out here. So we use TestNG. TestNG is not specifically for Selenium. It's a generic testing framework. You can use it for unit testing as well. You can use it for API testing as well, right? We actually, when I work with SOAP UI, you can integrate a SOAP UI with TestNG as well, and you can work with SOAP UI trial version, the one which is freely available, the SOAP UI version. You can integrate it with TestNG and work with it. So TestNG is for many other products. It's just not for Selenium. It's just that we can use it with Selenium to implement our test cases. Right. Now suppose I have to skip the login test. I don't want to execute it. I want to skip it. Right. So you can, if you have to skip a test, right? Suppose I'll make a new class called register test. Fine. In this, I'll keep the annotation. Right. And I want to skip this test. Yesterday I talked about exceptions with you, right? And I told you that in exception you can use try catch block and all everything. Okay. Now this exception was coming up because I had given something illegal, something wrong over here. I was dividing by 0. But if you have to deliberately throw an exception, okay, if you have to deliberately throw an exception, then you can do it yourself as well. You can go to this register test and just write throw new exception, some skipping the test because of some reason, right? Generally what we do is that in our Excel file or XML file we keep the hold on, throw new skip exception. Skip exception is the inbuilt exception in TestNG. Okay, throw new skip exception will automatically throw this exception, and generally what we do is that we keep a flag. We keep a flag in our Excel file, XML file or something, telling us that which test case to execute, which test case not to execute. I had talked in the beginning, right? You want to execute the test cases in a particular order, and you want to skip some of them, you don't want to skip some of them. So if you want to skip a test case, you keep a flag in some external file. I will talk about how to read that file later on. But if you have kept a file that fine, skip the test case reg, then you simply throw this exception, and now if I run this register test, you will see that in the console it is written that the total test cases were 1 and skips were 1. If you look at the results, then this test case has been skipped. Okay, and you get the message that skipping the test because of some reason. The message which you give over here, you get it's actually reported in the reports. If you look at the test output folder, the TestNG reports, if you refresh this, you will see that the reg test has been skipped because of some reason, right? So you can skip a test like this. So I taught you how to execute the tests in sample test one after another. In register test I taught you how, sorry, in login test I taught you how to use assertions, right? Assert true, assert false, expected value, actual value. And in the register test I taught you how to skip the tests. Fine. Now suppose I throw a skip exception inside my sample test. I skip the check product availability itself. Okay. Or what happens is that in check product availability I use assertion. I use that assert dot assert equals, I am comparing A with B. So what will happen? Both this test case will fail. Since check product availability will fail, both the other test cases should be skipped automatically. So if I run my sample test.java as a TestNG test, as a TestNG test, so what will happen is that in the results you will see that check product availability is failed, expected was B but the actual was A, and both the test cases were skipped automatically. Right? So in this, even if I write throw new skip exception in this thing, then the other two test cases will be skipped. Okay? So now another thing, that what if I want to execute these test cases in a batch? That means first, now I was running this individually, right clicking on the file, run it as. What if I want to execute all the 3 Java files together, and that even in a particular order? Fine. Say I want to execute sample test first, then register test, and then login test. Okay. So in that case, we use a file. We use a file, an XML file known as testng.xml. Just hold on. I'll just get that for you. Yeah. You take this file, keep this in your project, not under the source folder. Please mind it. You don't have to keep this file under source folder. You have to keep it at a project level. Okay. In this file, what you have is the first line says the test suite name. Okay, you can give any suite name, that is whatever is your test suite, you can give the name over here. Then the test cases, they come up one after another. Now the first test case for us is a sample test, right? So I'll write over here sample test case. You can give anything over here. It's not necessary to give the name of the file, but in the classes tag, you have to give the class name. That is, the class name is first the name of the package, that is test cases is the package, then the name of the class, that is sample test. So the sample test is actually inside the test cases, that's all. Second, after that, we have the registration test. Right, the second test case is for registration, and in that we have got test cases dot register test. Okay, cases. Make sure that the spellings are correct. S for sample is capital over here, T for test is capital, so you have to give the same thing. It is case sensitive. Java is a case sensitive language. People do this kind of mistake in this file and it becomes very difficult to find it out. Okay, because you will not get a proper error. So you have to be very careful. Fine. Test cases dot. The third test is for login. So the order in which you specify the test cases in this particular XML file, okay, in that order those test cases will be executed. Okay, and those test cases would be the part of one test suite called as my sample suite. And this suite tag ends over here. It starts on the top of the file, it ends over here, and it's got all the test cases in it. Fine, it's quite simple, right? So when you right click on this testng.xml file, select the option run as TestNG suite. When you run this, you get the output like this. Total test runs were 5, failures were 2, skips were 3, and if you look at the output, it's like this. The sample suite got skipped because sample test case, sorry. In it, the check product availability failed because of the assertion which I had kept over there, BA. Then the registration test got executed, it got skipped, and the login test got executed. There was some error message in assertion. Fine. So you can run them in batch. And if you look at your reports, the HTML reports which you get over here, and you refresh these reports, you get the same output over here as well. Okay. So, but we'll talk about better reports which will be better than these. We'll talk about them later on. Fine. Now, out here. Okay. Right. Hold on, let me see if I'm not missing something. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, you can please feel free to ask me any question. Hold on. Oh yeah. Okay. How to parameterize the tests using data provider. Okay. Well, in TestNG, okay. For example, I am executing this login test, right? I'll remove this assertion and all from here, or I will just make it pass. Fine. Now suppose you want to execute this test more than once with different sets of data. Okay, you have to run this with first set of username password, then second set of username password, then third set of username password. So you need to supply this data to the test again and again. Fine. For that we use an annotation called @data_provider. There are other annotations as well in TestNG which I'll be talking about in next class because I don't have time right now. So I'll talk about another annotation called @data_provider. Okay, this annotation is something like this. Hold on. Get data, you can give any name to this function. Now this function is responsible for providing the data to the test. Okay, it returns a two-dimensional object array. The concept is very simple, right? Please listen to this carefully, this is very important. Okay, it returns you a two-dimensional object array. The object array two-dimensional will have certain number of rows and columns. Okay, now number of rows would be equal to number of times you want to repeat a test. If I have number of rows 3, then this login test will be executed 3 times. Number of columns should be equal to number of parameters you have in the test. For example, username, password, email, city, something like this. Okay, in my test I will just have 2 parameters, username, password. So I will have 2 columns in the two-dimensional object array. Okay, so number of columns and number of rows. Number of rows is signifies the number of times you want to repeat a test, and columns number of parameters. Okay, so what you do is that you create a new object array like this, object array called say data equals to new object array, and in that you have suppose 3 2. So it is actually like object is the inbuilt class. Okay, you create an array, right? These are number of rows and columns like this. 3 rows and 2 columns. That means I need to execute the test login function 3 times. Okay, and we'll start filling it. I'll write data. It's to be filled like this: 0 0. 0th row, 0th column is equal to username 1. This is the first row. Then data 1 1. So this will be username 2, password 2. Okay, after this you will have data 2 2. So this will be the third row having username 3, password 3. Okay, I am writing the data over here. Later on we'll read the data from an Excel file or an XML file, wherever we have to read it from. Okay, right now I'm just hard coding it in the code, and in the end you will write over here a return data. Now this is the test case, this is the data provider. You need to link this test case, that means you need to tell this test case that get the data from this data provider. For that you write like this, that the data provider for this test is the name of the function get data. Okay, and number of input parameters in the function should be equal to number of you can say it should be equal to number of columns, because number of columns are equal to parameters, right? So number of input parameters in this login function should be equal to number of columns. So what will happen is that now if I run this test, automatically TestNG will go, it will read this annotation, it will say that the find test data provider is this. It will go inside data provider, it will get the first set of data, U1, P1, it will pass the username in this and password in this and execute the test. Then once this test is executed, it will pass this username here, this password here executed. So it will execute the test 3 times automatically. Only thing is configuration has to be correct. That is, number of rows should be equal to number of times you need to repeat the test, number of columns equals to parameters, and you need to give total number of input parameters in this function same as number of columns. Okay, and if you run this test, if I run this login test now, you will see that this test has been executed 3 times with 3 different sets of data. U1, P1 was passed over first, then U2, P2, and then U3, P3. Okay, in console as well it is showing total test runs as 3 because the test case was called 3 times. So this is how you can repeat a test with different set of data, and later on we'll read this data from some external file. We will not put it in the code. We'll read the data from the external file and put it inside the 2-dimensional object array over here. Okay, fine.